What did a teacher do that made you automatically gain respect for them? I went to a small charter school for middle school. Our English literature teacher was brand new to teaching. If I remember correctly, she was only 22, which seemed old at the time. She always did her best to be so cheerful and make learning fun. But the thing that truly solidified her spot as my favorite teacher was that for every student's birthday she would give you a personalized mini notebook. It was just a simple small composition notebook, but she had filled the first couple pages telling me how much she loved having me as a student, how far she knew I would go, and other affirmations. It seems small, but as a 13-year-old who had a crappy home life, it made all the difference in how I acted the rest of the year. When I was in the first grade, my mother gave me one of many really awful haircuts. The first day back at school afterward, the kids picked on me horribly. So much that I ran out and hid. The principal found me and we went back to the classroom, and he asked me to wait outside for a minute while he talked to the class. He then walked me to his office and bought me a Coke. The next day, first thing in the morning, we had an assembly with the entire school, and he walked up on stage with his head shaved completely bald and talked about bullying and the like. Some 20 years down the road he had retired, and I ran into him at the local college. Shook his hand and said, "You probably don't remember me." But yes, I do. He interrupted and said my name and the event. The man was and is a hero in my eyes. I had a physical education teacher who organized basketball, volleyball, handball and football tournaments, organized Olympic games for the local kids, and taught us dancing on weekends. On his own. Just for us kids. Because we lived in a remote place without many activities and things going on. He was more than a simple teacher. When I was a kid, we had to purchase these red punch cards to get lunch at school. Unfortunately, we didn't have that much money, so there were times where my punch card would run out and I wasn't able to eat for a while until we got enough money to repurchase another one. Why nobody in my family applied for assistance was beyond me. I had one teacher who noticed I wasn't eating every day, and she would bring an extra sandwich and offer it to me whenever she saw that. I really didn't understand how kind that was when I was a kid, but obviously as an adult that was such an amazing gesture of kindness. Not take my. I was a pretty decent writer in school. Able to pop stuff out pretty quickly that was superficial but sounded good. The first time I had a teacher hand my work back, pointing out that I managed to compellingly fail to say anything, was sort of a slap in the face that I didn't realize I needed. I had a professor once state that she doesn't believe in trick questions. Students trick themselves up enough without the professor helping that along. She never did put trick questions. Junior year of high school. English class. We were discussing a story we had read. One student, let's call him Carl, made a point. The teacher was dismissive and basically said Cole was wrong. The next day, after we took our seats, the teacher said, "Before we begin, I was thinking about what Carl said yesterday. I was wrong to dismiss it so quickly. Let's take a look at that again." He then went on to repeat Carl's point and initiate a conversation with the entire class. After the conversation, it became apparent Carl's point was indeed off base. But I was impressed the teacher publicly owned his mistake and went down the path he should have. A math teacher went to the hospital several times to visit a student who had been seriously injured in an accident. The teacher offered companionship, free tutoring, and genuine encouragement. It was a professor, but she said she wasn't going to have a textbook for the class. Basically, she didn't respect the textbook representatives trying to take the farmer approach to force kids to buy an $170 access code. Instant respect. You just had to show up to the lectures and she'd teach you what you needed to know. Told us a joke about his name before we could, and allowed us to eat during his classes because kids your age can't help being hungry all the time. As long as we did it quietly. Great guy. His whole attitude made all of us actually pay attention and do our best. Math teacher. I don't care if you have good grades or bad grades. If you work hard, I will work harder to make you pass. He worked hard for me. I passed. This will probably get lost, but I want to shout out this teacher of mine. She was our AP English language teacher for our senior year of high school. On one of the first days in her class, she explained how she went from being a kindergarten teacher to a high school senior teacher. She always saw off her cute and happy kindergarten kids. But as they grew up and they came back to visit her, a lot of them came to her troubled and dissatisfied with their lives. It made her real emotional about how people had treated these kids she loved so much. How she couldn't afford to see kids so disconnected with life. And how she didn't want them to suffer as they headed out towards college and their adult lives. So she changed curriculums and started teaching seniors. If I remember right, it always came down to sending her kids off with a smile. Prepping them for the real world. I respect the hell out of her and she'll always be one of my favorites. Truly like a mother to all her students. English teacher in high school asked where my homework was. Responded I forgot to do it and he said to the rest of the class, why can't you guys be like scratch that? I had a business studies teacher who used to be a mental health professional. So she knew the signs when my depression was particularly bad, for example submitting work at 3 AM, and would always make sure I had eaten and offered me coffee and generally made her classroom a safe space for anyone. Cestine, if you're reading this, you're amazing. Instead of shouting at my loud class for not shutting up before the lesson began, my history teacher decided to quietly tell the story of a pink elephant that wanted to be an astronaut. After a few seconds, people started to shut up and listen about the pink elephant. When everyone was quiet and listening, he stopped mid-story. As much as it made me respect him. Why didn't you finish the story, FFS? That cliffhanger. Treated kids with autism plus Asperger's like actual human beings. In my school I was in a special needs unit for kids with Asperger's and autism called the CDU, Communication Disorder Unit. The kids in there ranged from having mild Asperger's to full-on severe autism. And as such most teachers treated everyone from there like they had severe mental health problems just because they were labeled as having autism or Asperger's even if it was very mild. But there was one support teacher in the CDU who was genuinely just a nice dude. Whether he was talking to kids who had severe autism or just some mild social anxiety, he wouldn't talk extra slowly or call you bud or pal at the end of a sentence. He would talk to everyone like they were real human beings. It might seem like a small thing, but when that's how pretty much all teachers talked to you and treated you in every class, it was very refreshing to talk to someone who would talk to you based on who you were as a person rather than treating someone differently for being labeled as autistic. I moved out of home during high school. It was stressful, to say the least. I started to fall behind in assignments. I would be absent for days at a time. I missed tests, etc. I ended up explaining the bare minimum of my situation to my English teacher. And their response always stuck with me. Just do what you can. It may not seem like much, but right then and there, for a 16-year-old kid who felt like simply living was a burden, it was everything. I told my English teacher about my unfortunate experience at my last school, just stupid people treating me like crap. And he approached me after class and said, "Hey, I'm sorry that happened to you. You know there is a phrase in the English language that I think you ought to know. FCK them." I remember my 5th grade teacher had every student circle one book from the Scholastic Book Fair flyer. When the day came for the fair, if you didn't go to the library to purchase that book for yourself, she would buy it with her own money to make sure every student got to take a book home. I wouldn't have had any books of my own if it weren't for her. It was small, but he told us he was going to be in a bad mood that day because someone stole his bike. Just treating us like people was something that was rare in that school. I'm epileptic and had a large set of seizures not long before finals in high school chemistry. My seizures tend to mess with my memory. And those multiple seizures had devastated my memory of everything I'd learned in class that semester. I was doing reasonably well in class but absolutely bombed the test. After the failed test I ended up just shy of passing the class and he decided to give me a bonus question that passed me. I didn't expect that. But the empathy was nice to see from a teacher. Even still, the whole situation sucked. My math teacher told me I should have studied better. He then offered for me to retake the test, which seems reasonable enough, but there was no point as it was just all gone. I've only had one since that was worse than that. But fortunately I've got an understanding employer. It doesn't hurt that I've got a union rep as well. My high school science teacher paused class to rip a student apart for bullying another student. Called it out as soon as it happened. In front of everyone. And that bully never went near that other kid again. We'll always remember that. In my first year of high school, my class decided to play a simple prank on our English SOS teacher. By all laughing when he faced the board. And then stopping every time he turned around to face us. After a few minutes of this, he just left the classroom without a word. We all sat there, confused. Until a few minutes later the assistant principal comes in and explains that we've really upset our teacher. He made us believe we'd seriously ed up. Then our teacher walked in and pretty much went gotcha. That son of a bitch had our respect from then on. I remember my first math class in college. I didn't take any math my senior year of high school because I finished my math requirements my junior year. Anyway, the first math test hit me like a truck after never having to try in high school, and I scored in the low 60s. The next 3 tests, I learned to study and got 398s in a row. The last week of class, the professor, who was a hard ass by the way and would kick you out for having your phone out, called me up to her desk after class and said clearly you were having a bad day that first exam. So don't worry about that grade because I won't count it. It really changed my view of that professor. I had a principal in a new school I hadn't met yet because the first day of school at my new high school was my dad's funeral. He had no idea what I looked like. But he sought me out in the really crowded hallways and gave me a hug and his condolences. Never felt creepy. Only cared about. He went on to local politics and became our mayor. Only time I have truly voted for the best person for the job and not the least objectionable. Edited to add. Whoa. Thanks for the upvotes. I've never had a comment blow up like this. MR. Perry. If you see this, you earned my instant respect and kept it with your further actions. We need more like you. I had a professor that made it crystal clear that if we ever made an appointment and didn't show up, he'd take 5 points off of our final grade. I tried to find him during office hours and he wasn't available. My band director, he laughed with us. He talked to us like people instead of lowly teenage students. And he read to us The Power of Positive Thinking. He saw a need for it. Some of the kids were bored out of their skulls and thought it was stupid. But some of us listened. Personally, I love that he recognized a problem and took action. I've been out of high school for 30 years this year. I'm still in touch with him. He's the most influential person in my life that is not related to me. And it's because he chose to invest and do more than bare minimum as a teacher. I had a professor in college who was 5 minutes late to the start of an 8 AM lecture and clearly distraught. She started by apologizing for the delay and explaining that she just got off the phone with her sister telling her that her mother just died of cancer. The remainder of her lectures for the day were cancelled. But she was going to try to keep it together enough to do ours since we were already there so early in the morning. I respected that she decided to give us the lecture we had come for despite being in the immediate shock of mourning a loved one and being vulnerable enough to tell us. I had a teacher in the 6th grade who gave me a C+ on a poster project that I turned in. When he saw my disappointment he asked, "What grade do you think you should have gotten?" I thought for a second and said a B+. He immediately scratched out the grade and gave me a B+. Tragically, I saw in the news a few years later that he drowned while on a fishing trip. That got to me. My astronomy teacher in high school was a textbook nerd. Glasses, bow tie, mustache, pocket protector, the whole deal. There was a group of senior girls that would mock him mercilessly. One day, he noticed a pack of cigarettes hanging out of one of their purses. As he walked by during his lecture, he reached down and pulled one cigarette out of the box. He proceeded to insert the tip of the cigarette into his nose and continued the lesson like nothing was wrong. This dude must have kept that cigarette hanging in his nose for 30 minutes without mentioning it once. At the end of class, he casually walked back to the girl's desk, grabbed the pack out of her purse, inserted the nose cigarette, then shook the pack and handed it back to the girl without a word. It was such a baller move. Rock on. MR. Keith. I had been put in a lower set due to class capacity issues. He started off with a speech around what we would be learning this year and then assigned work to the class. After that he walked up to me and gave me a big book with the syllabus and told me he knew I'm too smart for this class and instead of following what the class does he wants me to work through the syllabus at my pace, faster than others being implied, and he would come and check on me after assigning work to everyone else. He said I could do lots of little each class but I needed to finish the book by the end of the year. Super duper motivated me to smash his class. My 4th grade teacher would have a classroom yard sale every year after she did her annual spring cleaning. Her daughter was about 13. So the things she'd recently outgrown would be age appropriate for us. I'm aware this wouldn't work out every year. And I'm not sure how long she taught at our school but she told us it was a regular thing. Close bracket. We didn't have to pay for them. If we needed or wanted something, we could have it. There was some sort of lesson incorporated into the yard sale. How to trade or value money or something like that. So we didn't feel embarrassed if we needed a few more things than the other kids did. I wish I could remember exactly how it worked. But this happened in 1994. She was an all-around great teacher. Thanks, Miss Farrell. Whose name I've probably misspelled. Your class was fun. I had a principal in high school that was extremely strict and was always looking to get people in trouble. It got to the point where everyone knew that even the teachers hated him. But none of them ever said anything about it because they didn't want to lose their jobs. Well, there was this one kid that was being accused of something he didn't actually do. And one teacher decided she'd had enough of the principal's bull and stood up for the kid. She was an amazing teacher and of course he fired her at the end of the school year. That didn't stop her from coming to my class's graduation the next year though. There was one other teacher that would make comments about the principal in class and insinuated his hatred toward him. Nobody snitched. And at the end of the school year on his last day of teaching, he wrote a note saying he quits because of the principal and left it on his desk and never returned. Love that man. I was in college and my teacher ran in about 10 minutes late. His excuse went something like this. Sorry I'm late guys. I was. It's not really important yeah just that. Me. A smartus. Dot. Artzilla? Him without missing a beat. Nope. Mothra. A small thing like a sense of humor is nice. He admitted that he didn't particularly want to be a teacher but did it for a stable career. The type of guy who should have been an English PhD but didn't have the money to chase an academic career like that. He was way too good to be teaching high school English. My speech class teacher, public speaking, etc., in my senior year of high school knew that I was a budding free speech anti-censorship guy. So for our debate project, she put me on the pro-censorship team. I was Ed. But when I asked her about it she gave me a line about how the teams were already set and she wasn't going to change them. Over the next few days I found out that 2 of the people who were on the anti-censorship side were actually in favor it. And a few people on the other teams were likewise put on the sides that didn't match their own views. Even at the time, I saw what she was doing. But every time I think about it, I see just how brilliant she was at teaching us how to look at the merits of all sides of an argument. As well as how well she knew the attitudes and ideals of at least 60 odd students that took her classes. Had a science teacher. He was absolutely terrific. A great teacher. A great everything. So one day his class was going on when I felt like I was getting my periods but within a few minutes it was clear that I was getting them because of the cramps. Now I didn't want to ask him because I had to tell him, but I also needed to go to the bathroom. He noticed. Said I could leave the class whenever I wanted without me asking and continued to teach. Still one of the best teachers I've had. He told me he gives $3 to Wikipedia every month. Respect. One of those extra teachers that walk around the class making sure everyone is doing their work. One day he walked up to me and started talking to me about Red Dead Redemption and Spider-Man. Math class. We're looking at the programming function of a graphing calculator. I tell him that finding the surface area of a regular polygon is incredibly tedious. So, we spend the next 15 minutes writing out a program on the calculator to do the math for me. The only math teacher I knew that genuinely understood that you cannot write a program to solve a math problem if you don't know how to solve it yourself. We had an exam. Saying I'll test your honesty and your teamwork. I'm gonna leave the room once your exam starts. So we thought it's between honesty that we don't share answers with each other. And teamwork by cheating. We were so desperate. And cheated the exams. Professor came back 5 minutes before the time is up and asked. So did you share your answers with one another? And yes, we said. Okay, he said. Since you are all honest and you proved to me that you had your teamwork as a class, I will exempt all of you for this exam. Just here to point out she also exempted herself from correcting your exam. A summer school teacher once lamented that he never had anyone just order pizza to class like in Fast Times. A couple days later a friend and I called up the local pizza place during our lunch break and convinced them to deliver to our classroom. He was so happy it actually happened that he just took a slice as tax and let us enjoy that pizza in the back of the room. Some students decided to be completely silent for an entire lesson and got all of us in on it. So when our teacher greeted us, asked us questions, etc., we all stayed quiet. He told us to discuss something and we all started typing or using made-up sign language. We could tell he was annoyed and said if we don't stop he'd make us do a test. And we soon broke and started talking laughing. What really got me was our teacher saying that after thinking what's wrong with these children, he started wondering if he did anything wrong to us. Normal teachers would have just snapped at us or assumed we were being stupid. But he actually thought about the things he did and tried to find an explanation. On mobile, so formatting might be weird. Give a damn. Had an English teacher who just did not care at all what we did. Then they called in a substitute when the primary didn't show up. She introduced herself and started us out with some simple book reviews, reading comprehension tasks. Don't worry much if you don't understand every little thing in the book. Just give me the broad gist of it. The books were those thin ones. No more than 60 odd pages or so. Every student in the class actually sat down and read a book in complete silence. Everyone made a book report by the end of the class. This continued until she had a firm grasp of who needed extra tutoring and such. By the end of the first year, everyone had improved their skills in the English language. She raised the average grade of our school by, I think, 2 grades. From a D to a B. Mind you, this was well over 20 years ago, so I might not recall all the details, but I will forever remember her. Victoria. Wherever you are or what you do in life, I thank you. I had a high school teacher who read The Giving Tree to every math class, not just his, but the entire math pod, every period of the day, including his off period, on the day before we all left for Christmas break. He did this to ensure he got basically every student in school. He said it was his favorite kid's book growing up and taught important lessons. He then ended by telling us we were no longer kids. We were adults. He told us he knew several of us would go to holiday parties and out with friends. And that we'd likely find ways to drink and try drugs. This, he said, is only to be expected of young adults our age. He didn't preach abstinence or anything like that. He just asked we thought of him and his story. And that we be safe. He would even offer rides if we needed them. No judgment. We all cherished him. Best teacher by far I've ever had.